when you are kind of so embodied in the elements of it, it's almost like a call to action without saying a call to action. It's like you're rising and people just want to innately follow you. And it's just that kind of like executive presence that you hold.
Hello to you, and welcome back to Relationships at Work, your leadership guide to building workplace connections and avoiding blind spots. I'm your host, Russel Lolacher. I was going to say the Lolacher, that makes no sense. I'm a communications and leadership expert. Got a couple of decades under my belt in both those areas. Curiosity, too, just like you, on how we can make the workplace a better one. If you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, I have great news. You're in the right place. A topic that has come up, why is my voice cracking? A topic that has come up again and again on our show is stress. Maybe that's what I'm feeling with the voice cracking. There's been good stress talk, there's been bad stress talk, its impacts, what we can do about it in the workplace and at home. But we don't talk often enough about what we can do about it within our own bodies, or how prepared we are for disruptions we handle in a day, a week, or even throughout our careers. And this stress, it's not going away. A 2025 study found that job burnout has reached an all-time high. 66% of employees are reporting burnout. Another major report found that 90% of employees feel stressed at work. 44% are considering quitting within the next 6 months because of stress. These numbers are consistent across different industries and jobs for both remote and on-site workers. This is an issue. This is a problem. So here's the question. How can we be better aware of our stress, the impacts it has on our body, and how can we be better prepared for it? I have one question for you. How is your neuro-fitness? If this is the first time you've ever heard that term, because it kind of was for me before I had this conversation, well, this will be really interesting and valuable for you. My guest today is going to help us with it. Hold on. And on the show today, we have Mallory Meyer, and here is why she is awesome. She's a speaker, trauma-sensitive, polyvagal-informed leadership and neuro coach. She's nodding and smiling, so my pronunciation was good. And fractional HR through her consultancy, White Wolf Reiki. Always get that wrong, Reiki. She's the host of the Keep It Human podcast, which I've had the absolute pleasure of being a guest on. She also brings over a decade of experience in corporate HR, partnering with senior leaders and leadership teams to foster peak well-being and culture productivity. Hello, Mallory.
What an introduction. Thank you.
Topic today, neuro-fit. We're getting into the brain. Before we jump into all of that, though, I have to ask the guests a question I ask all of my guests, which is, Mallory, what is your best or worst employee experience?
Well, just the way that the brain loves to work, holding on to the negativity bias of things. I'm probably going to share with you the worst experience just because it's so embedded. And honestly, the one that really stands out in my mind, whenever I'm asked a question similar to this, of thinking about something that really has stung, is kind of just being told that you are taking responsibility for something without any forewarning, without any conversation. It's literally just plopped in your lap and expected upon. And when we're looking about keeping it human, while also relationships at work, there's this element, of course, where from a supervisor, from a mentor, from your leader in themselves, having some context versus just being like, here it is, the expectation is go do it, but we can't even check in with your capacity and with your ability to actually do so. So that was one of my worst experiences, high level, keeping it a little bit vague, of course, here. But I think it can be relatable in the sense of if you ever have opened up your inbox to an email that says, oh, hey, this is now the new expectation in your work scope and responsibilities, and you don't have a say in it, it can be very alarming. And you kind of just feel almost in this freeze, because when I think about being in a freeze state, it's so overwhelming that you don't even know how to address that conversation and how to approach an individual just to even say, but do you care to know if I even have the space to do this? And that's really what left a really sour taste in my mouth.
It removes the humanity of it because you're not a person, you're a cog. You are, we don't need you here, we're going to move you here.
almost like one of those claws they have in the arcades or something where you're picking up a thing and moving it somewhere else. But yeah, how did that influence the rest of your career, seeing that going, oh, okay, so that's what I mean to you, or that's what I don't mean to you?
It really just kind of pinned you as that number. It took away that human element and like truly the empathy through it all. And really for me, it kind of threw two different threads into it. One, it really kind of was a catalyst to a decision for me to choose to leave that environment. Just because once you've lost my trust, once you've lost even like my respect, it's really hard personally to build that back up. And that to me was really just kind of the nail in the coffin to build the respect back up, no matter what you were going to try to do. So there was already kind of leading factors up to that. And then on top of that, it was just really a beautiful mirror in a sense, just to recognize this is the last place that I would ever want to be with someone that I was leading in the way that I would want to truly show my colors, have my communication style portrayed, and really just kind of echo, this is what I do not want. So how do I want to shape what I do want as a leader?
And I love that you sort of mentioned in there that it was, without lack of a better term, the last straw. These things don't happen generally out of the blue without little breadcrumbs being laid out going, and it might be a surprise. Don't get me wrong. It might be a surprise, but if you're looking for them, it won't be a complete surprise based on your interactions, your relationships, everything. We just, as leaders, have to be a little bit more situationally aware to be able to see them coming so that we can manage it easier.
Absolutely, right? Like you were saying, the breadcrumbs that can lead up, and then it's almost just like when something's already festering and you haven't even had that outlet to have the ability to express it because that communication channel isn't open, then it definitely leads to an eruption there like a volcano of, okay, I'm out.
And then we take it out on our partner at home. Yeah, totally understand. Totally hear that. Today we're going into the brain. We're going into the noggin. I'm going to get really sciencey. And define for me, actually, this is one of the key things that's always been a piece of this show, which is defining things. We throw out terms all the time, leadership, diversity, all these things, but there are some that really just need to be defined, like neuro-fit.
Yes.
Could you define it as it pertains to leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a spin that I've taken to the word like mental fitness. We talk about mental health a lot, but think about if we were to kind of lift weights for our brain, what does that look like? And that's really when we're talking about leadership, especially in the workplace, the focus that I've held neuro-fitness around. It's about how to have greater levels of agility. I don't love this word, but I'm going to put it out there, resilient. The cringe. But truly to have the fluidity and the range in your day, to have the spectrum of emotions, the intelligence and the degree and the social aptitude as well, as we strengthen the fortitude of your mental muscles, to kind of recognize, oh, okay, like maybe I could have had more situational awareness around this, or social awareness, emotional awareness. How is my recovery through these experiences as well? Because for many, from a certain experience, it could really take them out. And then it's really, again, like talking about how you're showing up, how you're continuing to lead. So coming back still with a lot more versatility and just like a heightened degree almost of, I now am going to learn from this and actually apply it. So that's when I talk about neuro-fitness, how we can look at it through different modalities and techniques in the lens of, you don't need to necessarily hold on to stress in the same way that you may have in the past to bring you to a point where you kind of have your weekends really aligned to be, I'll call it like restore and regenerative, but it's actually a weekend that you get to pour back in a way that doesn't feel like an escapism from work.
Okay, so we can't go much further without us jumping all over that one word that both of us kind of cringed at, resilience. And I want you to sort of explain of why that is a troublesome word for you and what we may need to look at it and how we might need to look at it differently.
To be honest, there's various different lenses. For me, the big cringe factor is oftentimes we throw it around so nonchalantly in the sense of, oh, someone can build resilience in a day. Let's kind of bring our leaders into this cohort around resilience. And I think its meaning has been taken out of context as to what that actually means, because For me, when I define resilience, I'm looking at each individual and honoring their past experiences and really a threshold of tolerance in their ability against risk, in their ability against discomfort. And when we look at resilience in the lens of the nervous system too, it's coming back into that rest and digest, like your homeostasis, where you can be able to bring yourself into this place without getting so caught in your fight or flight. And I think that necessarily is a lens that isn't necessarily taken. It's, can you be resilient to have a tough conversation at work or to take on more workload without looking at the humanity side to it? And then again, the training around it to me is a little bit superficial and high level, where it's not getting into these barriers of the human essence of what it actually means from a tolerance and range standpoint. Does that help to clarify it?
It does. It does. My thing with resilience is, and I get it, adaptability is probably my better phrasing for that.
Mhm.
I always challenge it going, but why do you need to be resilient?
Mhm.
What is something you need to be so strong against? To be honest, I see it as possibly an excuse for bad leadership. Going, if you're stronger and more resilient, you can weather these bad toxic cultures or bad leadership decisions. I'm like, why are we not addressing the bad leadership and the toxic culture? Why are
Yes.
we needing to be resilient?
Mm.
It's the context is what I'm kind of trying to stress is I get it, but why? It just feels like it
Mhm.
needs a deeper conversation than just going, you need to be resilient. Really? Do I though? Or
Exactly.
do you just need to be softer or more understanding?
Exactly. And I feel like it was something that came about during the COVID time where people were going through so much change and that change management piece. And we just kind of witnessed again people's ability to have to deal with some adversity and to have to deal again with that agility side of themselves too. And now it's almost like that context of it can get lost because it was just so apparent in that time frame.
So, how do we understand our own neurofitness? Self awareness
Mhm.
is such a big piece of this, but if we don't know what we don't know, how do we go to the mind gym? I guess metaphors here.
That's a great metaphor for it. Like, how do we take ourselves and understand, should I be picking up the 5-pound weight or should I be picking up the 50-pound weight?
Exactly.
Yeah, I always want to bring in a practice called mapping your nervous system. But at the end of the day, what mapping your nervous system at a very kind of baseline way to look at it and how we can kind of self reflect even deeper is kind of recognizing what is my coping mechanism, my behaviors, my physiology. And back to that word about self awareness, I think it's really kind of taking that lens back towards ourselves and shining the spotlight within to recognize, okay, here's a situation that happened today. And it really made me feel whether it was depleted, whether I felt like I was unheard, whether I just felt like I didn't even want to engage anymore because our metabolic resources were becoming shut down through anger and through just kind of like defeat. But then what did I choose to do? And if I can remember and recall my physiology and like my bodily kind of situation in that experience, did I feel like my heart rate was racing? Did I feel really flushed and heated? Did I feel like I was clenching my jaw? And kind of just those are the bodily kind of awareness pieces I want someone to bring in. But then also recognizing, where was I looking in my situational awareness as a coping mechanism for regulation to calm me down from there? Was it a pet, which I have laying next to me right here as like a nice soothing element, or was it a plant? Was it a person? Did I actually have to get outside and move my body to kind of shake that energy off? Put on a song. So these are all elements, maybe unconscious and conscious to some people, that can really help to support within when I think about the proverbial ladder that we move upon in our nervous system is we're kind of constantly going up and down this ladder, and in the middle of the ladder is your fight or flight. So when you're kind of feeling like your metabolic resources are so expended and exhausted to be like, I just can't anymore, that's because you're going down your ladder into freeze. You're depleted. So then what did you do to bring yourself back up? Maybe you wanted to indulge in chocolate. Maybe it was ice cream. So it's kind of picking up these cues little by little so you can start to have a resource library, not only for yourself to, hey, I see you, acknowledge it, identify it, but now I'm beginning to change it. So instead of going for the ice cream this time, I am going to choose to go do a yoga practice and gently start to shift the energy in my body to guide myself back up to the area of regulation of my ventral vagal kind of area of my nervous system. So that would be kind of like a tip in when we're talking about that word self-awareness. Can you recognize these cues, bodily, environmental, just in your relationships, all of that?
So I'm trying to think of this from a neuro-fit versus not neuro-fit perspective. It's
Mm,
like I'm looking at the back of an old comic book where they have that before and after images.
yeah.
What does a neuro-fit person look, act, and show up as versus a not neuro-fit will show up, act? Can you give like a comparison that would explain this a little better?
So they would have a lot, let's say like a neuro-fit, like looking at it in that lens, they would have resources and an opportunity in their toolkit to kind of just acknowledge and have a lot more like self-compassion. That's a huge word of like they have the ability to notice and have that situational awareness, but more so than anything, with their toolkit, they're able to kind of bring in compassion for their responses. And they're able to have that like opportunity. Let's say the word co-regulation for me is all about making someone, you're not going to get heightened and activated by someone else's anxiety or anger or stress. Like you're the calm anchor in the room to calm someone else down. So that's part of the noticing of someone that's neuro-fit is because when you're in that branch of your nervous system, you're kind of essentially the nonverbal cues are how your facial expression is, the gaze of your eyes, the tempo of your breath, again, bodily physiology, just this unconsciousness that's happening between us without us even consciously being aware of it
Mm.
can be so what's the word I'm really looking for? There's so much magnitude to it without even recognizing it. But when you do start to recognize it, it really kind of changes the lens of that. When we're talking about the comic book color, I think about what's the lens of the glasses that you have on today? Is it like a purple hue or is it a green hue? And that's all because of someone's neuro-fit ability.
And if they don't have that, is it a lack of confidence? Is it they're overcompensating? Is it like what are we if I see somebody visibly in a meeting and I'm like their neurofitness is a bit lacking. They need to pick up the 10 pounders.
Yeah, there's different degrees depending
Mm,
on the individual's experience. More often than not, like what I hear from individuals that I work with is from like the confidence. Yes, like imposter syndrome can be a
mm,
huge piece of the pie. But more so than anything, it's almost like they're finding themselves so depleted as well. So let's say their energies in the day, if at 5 p.m. comes around and they just feel like they need to almost kind of go into isolation and go into a place where they can't even engage with anyone else, that's a huge cue to me from hearing from someone that's been able to self-identify that they need support. Because again, their ability of neurofitness is they're moving into that freeze zone. So they're moving into a place of dissociation. And it's almost as if they've been masking a
mm.
version of themselves in the workplace that isn't true to their, using that word, I know you and I talked about this on my podcast, but authentic self. So they haven't been true to who they are. So it's been essentially wearing that mask. So that's a big teller for one around neurofitness as
Right.
well, because you're comfortable with all parts of yourself because you have that compassion within too, to recognize, I love myself about this. I accept myself within this. But yes, stress and anger can also be a very varying degree to witness in someone's lack of, I'll just kind of say like the empathetic side of even just kind of picking up on the cues in the environment that they're within of their team and the essence of that to be able to explore it in a deeper sense and just kind of really be short, be unwilling to open up dialogue that can have more culminative and collaborative efforts within it.
We're talking about how the cognitive process. We're talking about your ability to make decisions and just sort of you're coming from a more fit place. Now, I see this and I keep getting the metaphor of the fitness thing, right? How do you stretch? How do you prepare yourself, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, whether it's cognitively, to be fit? Because it's not like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a light switch, I'm assuming. It is a
Yep.
progression over time or tested in scenarios. So what are we doing to be more neuro-fit?
Also, regards to, for one, like the element just with, there was something that came to mind and it left so quickly as you were speaking. But ultimately, when I look at like the neuro-fitness lens of it, there's a term called, and I'll share this with the audience, like it's called your window of tolerance. You may be familiar with it in the work and the studies. The window of tolerance is essentially, again, unique to each individual. We all have this window. And within this window is our range of comfort, ultimately. And that thought just came back to me. So I'm going to bring it in as I talk about this right now. But ultimately, when we're in this window, like you were saying, like the decision-making element to it, it's because when we're talking about neuro-fit, the language, how I've used it, is because you're in a more fluid, regulated state. It's not that you're intended to be regulated and taking that word regulated in your nervous system 100% of the time. It's how quickly you can get yourself back into regulation when a situation arises that puts you outside of your window or puts you into fight or flight. And the value of being within your window, this window again of your tolerance, or within kind of ultimately regulation, is that's when we are engaged with our prefrontal cortex. So this is, of course, like you said, decision making. This is where we have the ability to problem solve, to be more creative, to be more intuitive. Like the list can go on, but that's where executive functioning lives. But most of the time we're living in fight or flight, which is not part of our executive functioning. So it's really kind of that emphasis of, yes, I see it, that magic and that power is there when I'm in that place of regulation, and I want to be there more because I'm so connected. And the way, going back to your initial question here around, okay, how can I expand myself? When I look at someone's window, and that's actually, once we've mapped someone's nervous system and they've been able to kind of identify, I kind of live in this zone 80% of the time, perhaps. And now it's really kind of staring me in the eye about how I see the world when I'm in this zone. So then I know when I go into my place of regulation, the lens I take and how I see the world, but little things that I can do to start to jump out of that window, do something like stretch myself. And a very tangible example for me this year has been public speaking. I know you have heard my story a little bit around just like doing Disrupt HR, but I would never see myself public speaking, to be honest. And I had to first take the step of doing it in a small group. Okay, I've had that experience in my body, and visualization can be a good cue because our body kind of assimilates with our nervous system, only good or bad. It has to know and feel and experience. So even if you haven't ever public spoken before or had that experience, if you can't feel it in your body first, your nervous system is just going to say, this is bad, it's danger. You don't know what this is. So of course it's going to feel scary. So there's elements like that we look at to see what's the ambitious goal. What's your next step that you want to take? Because I work with a lot of, again, this word high performers, but individuals that are already kind of ambitious and motivated, have an internal driver, but they kind of feel like they have a glass ceiling at the same time. Like maybe they kind of stretch themselves and then they come back to their comfort zone. And it's really hard to stretch themselves again because they almost kind of take that rubber band too far and it snaps. So we want the rubber band to just be a little bit more fluid and flexible through different situational experiences and ones that they can hold in their body through visualization, because that's such a powerful element to train the brain. I dropped a lot there.
No, good. It's meaty. And I'm in the, I won't pretend that I was pronouncing anything right, but in your bio, we were talking about your polyvagal-informed, and that has to do with the nervous system. And you keep bringing up the nervous system. So how is that interconnected when it comes to neuro-fitness?
So that's really much the element truly of it all, to be honest. Like the way that to stand, not even to stand out wouldn't be the right word, but to kind of uniquely carve an edge in the industry in the way that I've been sharing the work. Mental fitness is a big, like we were saying, mental health, but take it as mental fitness, neuro-fitness. And when I stumbled upon this work, all I kept on kind of hearing in my own mind was this needs to go back into corporate because individuals need to know the science behind how their body is. I've done so much from the subconscious lens, but you can only take the brain so far without not necessarily having the body on board with you. So that was a huge element for me of when we're talking about the body, it's our nervous system. So it really became the foundations of everything I do to then build upon the other necessary techniques, whether it's hypnotherapy, whether it is kind of like timeline techniques, so like taking someone back in a subconscious lens to let go of decisions and beliefs that they've held on to. But it kind of compounds from that point forward.
Hey, if you're enjoying the insights from our guests, you'll love our Raw Notes newsletter. It's packed with guest takeaways, the resources that inspire them, and my own tips on how we as leaders can be better humans for the humans that we're responsible for. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and subscribe now and help the workplace be more human.
Stress keeps coming up a lot too in this conversation. What tools are we getting here? Because I mean, we've talked a lot about the neuro-fitness of this and the strength we can have. Looking at it from okay, you're at work and you're getting some of the most intense last minute fire drill kind of conversations. How is neuro-fitness showing up in those moments that you're like, no, I have the tools to deal with this? How do you know?
So essentially there's so many various ways that we can kind of quickly in 30 seconds connect in to signal to our brain and to our body that I am safe, that I am connected through neuro techniques that signal that. So the only downside with being on podcasts at times and trying to explain it is that they are very somatic based. And so to try to describe them, it can be challenging. I'll just kind of put it like that. But there is one that I'll try and like ever so briefly describe. So ultimately, a neuro-fit exercise, something so simple just to describe on the podcast, would be if you were to take the tip of your tongue and press it against the back of your front teeth, and then you're going to essentially raise your tongue to the top of your mouth and just press on the top of your mouth with your tongue. So it's subtle, it's discreet. But the nerves on the top of your mouth are like part of your vagus nerve. So you're signaling without anyone knowing that you are connected, that you are starting to calm down and feel safe. So you can let your body know that without kind of going and doing something wild and crazy. There's also another one that is very kind of tangible that I personally always go to. And it essentially just is about keeping your head straight. And then you're going to look to the side without moving your head, just with your eyes as far as you can, and hold that gaze for about 30 seconds until you yawn, you sigh, or you swallow. And then you're going to shift your eyes back center, and then you're going to go to the left, and you're still going to, again, I'm probably about to yawn right now, but you'll yawn, you'll sigh, or you'll swallow. And just through that exercise, took me 15 seconds maybe there, I've already kind of just been able to signal to my vagus nerve, our branch of the nervous system, that I am safe, calm, and connected. And I even just feel the shift myself. So it's really powerful in the subtlety of the repetition of these tools when you're provided them and you have the resources and the awareness to bring them into connection with your day.
When you work through with leaders these exercises, I kind of know the answer because it feels so human and universal, but I have to ask the question, does diversity come into this at all? Because there are people of other generations that might, first off, I think selling it to different generations might be different depending on who the generation is. I see that serve from buy-in, but also how they approach these things. So how have you seen, and generations, maybe it's culturally, is there any additional information when it comes to diversity that we should be aware of when approaching neurofitness?
Yeah, like the blessing in disguise in some sense has been the conversations that have been held in the workplace around neurodiversity. Because neurofitness can be a huge contributor to neurodiversity in the sense of working with the neurodiverse population and extending resources like this for them. So there is a level of buy-in at the same time that I'm noticing, especially when we're talking about like that diversity question, more so from different generations. Because it's almost, well, I've done it. So like I've done it to this point and I've survived, right? Like that kind of like notion about there's nothing wrong here. It's almost just, again, back to the mask. but are you really okay? Because you almost don't even know what that flip side of the coin is. And so for me, myself, that's an audience that I'm not necessarily looking at speaking with. It's more of the younger audience, the more adaptive, like kind of startup kind of businesses that already know and have a little bit of an appetite of we are progressive to see change here. Which battle do you want to win? Because there's definitely kind of some eyebrows that can raise, but I will say because there's so much science behind it, that's what I love about it because it bridges science, spirituality, and even just like other elements of the mind that kind of go overlooked. So it's really kind of looking at less about high performance, but when I think about the word high impact, how can we kind of couple that into an organization and for a leader versus the performance side, which has been so kind of detrimental, but at the same time, a pressure cooker to be within.
And that makes me start thinking about hiring and promotions within an organization because we reward the high performers. Should neuro-fitness be a factor when it comes to hiring and it comes to promoting within an organization? Because the only thing we can see is, well, you created a widget, you fixed a problem, but you don't see questions like, so how do you handle stress tied to neuro strength? It's more of like, how did you handle stress to deliver the thing I need you to deliver? It's so
Exactly.
process-based, not humanity-based. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it because it's such a key element, right? Because when we're looking at truly back to hiring perspective too with a KPI where you don't want to necessarily have someone come in, you've spent so much money, and then you're back into looking at the retention numbers, like the industry in itself of what it costs, or even back to that word around stress and looking at attrition. And like even elements like this, like it really does bring an element of uniqueness to a hiring process to embed questions like that, especially again when we're thinking about neurodiversity and we want to be able to kind of have more humanity and harmony and healing in the workplace in itself. I think it was so foundational to also bring that and start to explore that for individual, just to see the long-term gain, not only for a person, but from a financial side, of course, as well.
What gets in the way of people being neurofit?
One, sometimes it truly is, I'll call the elephant in the room. Sometimes it's just skepticism, like we're talking about diversity. It's, well, why can't I just meditate? Why can't I go for a run? Why would I want to kind of explore an avenue like this? Sometimes it's also not just skepticism, but even fear. So it's a very vulnerable place to put yourself in because it's almost, again, like putting a spotlight on these blind spots, on these spots that maybe you haven't even addressed within yourself. We look at root issues, and that's what I love about it. It's not about a Band-Aid here. It's actually about when we untangle and we take the layers of ourselves off, it starts to open up and breathe space for other elements. And that in itself can be really confronting for some people. I also think too, time is sometimes the biggest kind of factor in currency in our day and age. And it's not even that there's a lot of time that's required to actually, I shared 2 exercises in a minute. But that's just like the starter. So that's scratching the surface. I think that time is the investment that someone needs to make into themselves. And how, again, that isn't necessarily always the priority until, sadly enough, everything hits the fan and everything's toppled. So the proactiveness through it is part of it too. And that's just kind of cultural communication, everything that kind of embeds itself. But I'm just, I can't be more passionate about it because I truly am a testament and I've seen work for myself and for my clients.
And you brought up one of my biggest roadblocks to good leadership, which is being too busy. And that's the thing, right? If you want the tools, if you want to be the better human, the better leader, you have to prioritize neurological fitness because it's not just producing a thing or fixing a widget or putting out a fire. You're not a leader, you're a manager at that point.
Yeah.
So if you're not investing in yourself to be better for the people around you, then what are we talking about?
Exactly. And it just kind of ripples forward, which is like the beauty of it. Back to that co-regulation piece. It's like when you are feeling calm, connected, confident, and at ease, it's just going to extend to the others within your space to feel that way too and reciprocate.
So a leader gets it. We're going to be all rainbows and unicorns here. So a leader gets it. They are neuro-fit, and yet they're in an organization that doesn't get it. How do you perpetuate, plant the seeds, get some consistency going, help mend a culture, modeling this behavior? Like, what do you do to, again, relationships at work? How do you perpetuate a relationship with your teams that promotes something like this?
I'm very accustomed to that. I always say, especially in the beginning of my journey, I was kind of in the spiritual closet because it was so hard to kind of have that relationship at work that brought that spiritual lens into conversations and kind of showcase what I had to offer as well. But you said the word modeling, and the word that I always like to choose is like being in true embodiment of it. Because when you are kind of so embodied in the elements of it, it's almost like a call to action without saying a call to action. It's like you're rising and people just want to innately follow you. And it's just that kind of like executive presence that you hold. So it's kind of without the words being said that in that context, I'll just kind of say it as it can really kind of lean into opening up conversations about, well, if something's different, or what have you been focusing on, where it doesn't have to feel like you need to be the one to open up the space. It's just kind of extended to you. But at the same time, I think it's also kind of like a degree of understanding where can I start to bridge some of this into perhaps like dialogue when we're talking about whether it's factors around cost or we're looking back at well-being and wellness, equally like the health of the employees or individuals. Maybe it's bringing in a new lens because you've tried that same way over and over for the past couple of years. The old industrial era, I should say, of like just corporate in itself. What can we do to shift things? And that could be part of that momentum to kind of help to support.
I think if you want to look at employee retention, if you want to look at people that don't work for you, going up to your leadership, going, are you hiring? Because nobody seems to leave, but I'd love to work for your team. Like, you're exemplifying the kind of leadership that they want and they want to work for. I think that screams volumes about neuro-fitness, is that they see you as a beacon of, oh, that's how it should be, as opposed to that's how it is.
For sure. And I know like you yourself can be a testament to that too, right? Like the time of the retention that you've held within your team, and like just that ability, like I was saying too, like you don't need to say much because your embodiment, your modeling of it is part of the work and it shines through in that element. But it is a lot of the times, like sometimes it can be like someone approaching you about your calmness. I feel like that's always something that individuals doing public speaking, they're like, well, how were you so calm? And it's part of that. When we were going back to that word co-regulation, when I go into a new space, there's social regulation. So I want to be able to scan my environment and be able to kind of make mental notes about what I can see that I can go back into anchor against. When I feel like I'm dissociating from myself, how can I bring myself back into my body? So that's a huge piece of it. But yes, neuro-fitness, there's a key of self-awareness there, of course, but there's also a key of a commitment. Like we were talking about wanting to be better, but a commitment to the tools, because just like the gym, you're not going to be able to just kind of show up one day, lift 5 pounds, and then go ahead and lift 50 pounds the next day. You need to continuously train. You need to continuously have repetition within these resources. And that, going back even to that word resilience, but that's really how you build it, to be able to have a stronger sense of like even understanding and compassion in that lens as well.
Sorry, nobody's getting neuro-jacked in a day. They're going to have to build a little bit of muscle first. Thank you so much for this, Mallory. Yeah, I could keep talking to you. There's so many sides to this that I'd like to explore, but we're giving everybody a taste and my brain's a little bit bigger for it. So I appreciate it. The last question. What's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
Honestly, this is going to sound so simple, but there's a question that I personally love. And this kind of one simple thing could be just asking someone, how are you? Was going to really be it. But One really key question that I find to be really valuable, especially just thinking about if you're in a leadership capacity, is what worked for you today and what didn't work for you today. And I want to put the emphasis on today because people can kind of just get very high level with it. But when you really drill it down and seed it into today, it kind of opens up exploration and some really genuine feedback. And that comes back into being curious to tell me more. And I think it can't be stressed enough about asking questions like that to build relationships at work.
Oh, she finished up with the name of the podcast. That's Mallory Meyer. She is a speaker, trauma-sensitive, polyvagal-informed leadership and neuro coach and fractional HR. And if you haven't listened to her podcast yet, please check it out. It's called Keep It Human. Thank you so much for being here, Mallory.
Thank you, Russell.
We are done. We are putting a bow on it. That is the latest episode. Thank you very much to Mallory for joining us. Super interesting, eh? As a leader, the relationship with ourself is the most important relationship at work we have. And this was an interesting episode on even just some of the little things. The tongue on the top of the roof thing just blew me away. I did it a few times. I'm like, oh, this is working for me. Anyway, I hope this episode worked for you. I hope you found it very, very valuable. If you think anybody will take something away from this because stress is such a big part of their lives and they're not sure how to handle it, and you think this episode will help, please share it along. Pass it along. Thank you very much. Let's end it there. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Take care.